All right, hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. So today I wanted to announce that I was going live, and so hopefully you're able to take a lunchtime break or whatever, or just listen in because I am excited to just share information about just things that I've uncovered along my journey in the Word. So one of the things that I used to be like sort of confused about, but just put it to each side was like, is the Bible and science on the same page? Like you have evolution on one side that we are taught in school, and I went to public school majority of my life, so you're taught about evolution and that the Earth is millions of years, and it just didn't make sense because I knew that the Bible says this is how creation happened, but then evolution is saying this other thing, and so it was for years in my mind. It was just like two completely separate things. Somebody's right. It's just a matter of who. The unfortunate thing is that I was only taught it in school. And so there wasn't another side of the argument that I was taught, like necessarily, in church school or anything like that. Never heard a sermon about it. It just sort of was like to me, what church presented was, well, we're going to let school do the education portion and we're only going to talk about the Bible. But when you really look at it and you really read it, it's very much so intertwined. A lot of our education should consider that there are things that the Bible teaches that confirm science, and there is things that science teaches that confirm the Bible. Really should be integrated as much as possible. So what I have to share today is some research that I've just done on my own. Like when I read the Bible in a few years ago, I realized like, oh, the Bible gives a lot of information about genealogy, and genealogy gives a lot of information about time. So why is it that why are we talking about the fact that the earth is a millions of years old, and like why is that something that's taught as if it's true when the Bible really says something completely different? So I went, doing my own digging. I also like watch documentaries because that's something that I like to do. And I just over time pieced this thing together. And so it's super critical that we understand that the Bible says one thing and science says another. But unfortunately, only one voice in science is being proposed to us when we're in school and our children are being taught evolution. That's only one side of the argument. There's a whole other side of the argument that's really suppressed that should be validly considered, even though the evidence is in the Bible. So, as Christians, we have to do a better job with teaching our families, our children, the truth because the earth is not a million years. So, I present to you some information that should help. And so I am live on Instagram and I am also live on Facebook and YouTube. So for today, I do have a presentation sort of thing that I want to share because what I'll be reading from, you kind of want to see numbers and things. So if you're on Instagram and you want to hop over to my YouTube, Getting on Higher Ground, that would be better for you to see visually. But if you just want to listen in and hear, of course, you'll get the same information. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and jump into the presentation. So, time according to the Bible starts us off in creation. The first 6 days of the Bible are critical. Okay. Why is it critical? So, there is so many people who kind of get confused on this. The first 6 days is a literal 6 days, y'all. Now, of course, when I'm presenting information, I'm presenting from the facts of the Bible, what I've prayed about, what I've sought out. You got to do your own into researching that. I know that it's a reference to, oh, God sees a thousand days is like a year, and a year is like 1,000 days. Or, I mean, I'm sorry, a day is like 1,000 years, and a 1,000 years is like a day to the Lord. I know that that is a reference that people put out there, but that is more like, a comparison. Is not saying that every day that God has is 1,000 days or 1,000 years. That's really not how it is. So it wouldn't be that, oh, 6 days really took 6,000 years. The reason why I stand on the fact that the first 6 days, the first 7 days was a literal 7 days, and a day because it literally lays it out that way in Genesis. When you read it, he says, and I'll read from Genesis 1. Let's jump to the first day. All right. We know that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. When you get down to verse 3, it says, Then God said, Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. Then he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day and the darkness night. And evening passed and morning came, marking the first day. And evening passed and morning came, marking the first day. Here's a fun fact for those who don't know. When ever you see a Jewish person, let's say, or you encounter a little bit of their culture, they always start the Sabbath, which is Saturday, on Friday evening, because in God's time, the evening and then the morning is the full day. So by the time you get to evening, you're starting a new day. When the sun is setting, that's a new day. In our current Gregorian calendar and all that good stuff, we start a new day at midnight and, go from midnight to midnight. Technically, based on the Bible, it is evening to morning. So he gives us the definition of a day right there. So why would we think that it's 1,000 years? So you cannot merge what modern science says into your framework of the Bible. It really has to be the other way around. You have to merge the framework of the Bible into science, because if it doesn't fit, then science is wrong and it doesn't make sense. The Bible says that evening passed and morning came, marking the first day. Here's another reason as to why you should confirm for yourself that it is a literal 7 days. And this is key to us believing in this million-year evolution theory. Here's another reason. On the seventh day, it says that God rested. Okay. That same seventh day he taught them to have he modeled for us to have as a Sabbath is the same day. Sorry, moved too fast. Is the same day that they practice every week. So he modeled what a week looks like. It didn't change from the time of creation up until now. Like, it's the same timing. So if the Sabbath was the Sabbath then, it's the Sabbath now. The timing is the same. A day is a day. So with that being said, the first 6 days, we've got a lot happening. You have so many things being brought forth and being spoken, and let there be light, and put a firmament in to separate the waters of the heavens from the waters of the earth. And we've got all these things happen. Let land appear, let animals walk up. We have all these things happening in the first 7 days. You got light, day and night. You have sky. You have the dry ground and vegetation. You got the sun, moon, and stars, which we talked about last week. The sun, moon, and stars being this whole zodiac culture that people have going on. Go back to last week's live so you can get out of that culture, because we are doing a culture correction here. You got water creatures and birds, and we've got land animals and mankind. All right. That is the first 6 days. All of that is happening. Now, here's where it gets good in the Bible. And I want to encourage you to make sure that you all read and don't skip over certain parts of the Bible. I know that, it's like it's boring. You need more understanding. You need somebody to teach it to you. But like, every aspect of the Bible is good. And especially when we get to the genealogies, those are the things that prove the time and stuff. So you got 6 days that have passed and all of creation is there. Well, then what happens? So obviously, we know that Adam got kicked out of the garden and all that kind of stuff happened. So what I have here for you is a list of the first 10 generations, so that we can literally mark time. The Bible helps us to mark time because it tells us. And this is in Genesis 4. Is it Genesis 4? Let me look at my little notes here. Genesis 5, the genealogy of from the beginning of time up through a certain point is listed. The first 10 generations up through the flood. And so we can literally count the years because it gives it to us. It's plain as day. So you got to read the Bible. And what I have done for you on this chart is I've given you the exact person who was mentioned. The number of years is the subtext right here. that you can see how long they actually live. And at each part, when somebody else was born, this is how old this person would have been. So you can literally track how old was Adam by the time the flood happened, or by the time Enoch was born. Like all the generations, it's not like today where somebody you only have your, let's say, grandparent, or some of us are blessed enough to have our great grandparents to know them. In this time, Adam was there like almost 10 generations in. So we have enough evidence to prove, based on the years that God gives us in the Bible, who was born when, what year it was, because we still in year one. So Adam is year one. Adam is 6 days. Oh, sorry. Yeah, he's 6 days younger than when light was created. Like that's how close it is. So it's literally 6 days, and then Adam is born, and then you count the years. So we know exactly how old the earth is. Please do not believe the estimates. The interesting thing is, as I have studied evolution and learned more, the interesting aspect is that they have to have time as a part of the equation. Why? Because they have to say that there is so much time in order for evolution to be true. So if we're able to disprove time, which of course we don't want to do, because then you have to kind of figure out all these other things and what's true and what's not true. If you can disprove time, you can disprove everything about evolution, because it's all based on time. What evolution says is that essentially there was this creation that happened. There was this atom that grew and became something, which grew and became something. So in order for it to keep growing and becoming the next thing, the leaf turned it into, you literally need a lot of time for atom to evolve and become more complex. You need thousands of years for each time a new species is supposed to be introduced. So of course, the evolution says it's a million of years, but it makes sense that 6 days creation was done, and we don't need all that extra time for the world to have evolved to what we see today. So what we're going to walk through, and if you have questions, please include them, and hopefully I can switch back over and get to the questions, and I can see them on Instagram as well, because this is an important enough topic for us to make sure that we are hone in on. Like we got to understand this, because if we let science and what schools are teaching be louder than what we are teaching, then they get to control the narrative. The narrative that's being pushed is not true. What is true is that God created the earth in 6 days, and that we can mark time from the time of creation up until now. And that's based on the Bible. So I'm going to read Genesis 5, the genealogy of Adam through Noah. And, if you're a history person like I am, this should be very interesting. If not, make sure you pay attention to the chart, because if you're a math person, it's going to make sense when you look at the math on the chart. And if you're not a math person, then, you're just going to have to bear with us, because you got to have the specifics to make this make sense. First, we're going to start with Adam. All right, this is a written account of the descendants of Adam. When God created human beings, he made them to be like himself. He created them male and female, and he blessed them and called them human. When Adam was 130 years old, he became the father of a son who was just like him in his very image. He named him Seth. After the birth of Seth, Adam lived another 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Adam lived 930 years when he died. Now we know that Seth was the son after Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel, and then they had Seth. So they had Seth at 130 years old, and then he lived another 800 years. So that's why you see it that way in the chart, because it's telling you how long Adam lived, at what age he was when he had Seth, and then it's gonna follow the same pattern. It's gonna tell you what age the person was, and you can follow this person's line, Adam, all the way across, Seth, all the way across, all the descendants, all the way across, to find out how old they were. All right, so let's do this a little faster. When Seth was 105 years old, he became the father of Enosh. Boom. That means Adam was still alive. After birth of Enosh, oh, I'm sorry, I realize I have a typo. It's Enosh, not Enoch right here. Enosh. I need to go back and change that. When Seth was 105 years old, he became the father of Enosh. After the birth of Enosh, Seth lived another 807 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Again, I'm coming from Genesis 5. Seth lived 912 years, and then he died. All right, when Enosh was 90 years old, he became the father of Kenan. After the birth of Kenan, Enosh lived another 815 years old, 15 years, I'm sorry, and he had other sons and daughters. Enosh lived 905 years and then he died. When Kenan was 70, he became the father of Mahalalel. Mahalalel. After the birth of Mahalalel, Kenan lived 840 years. He had other sons and daughters. Kenan lived 910 years and then he died. All right. When Mahalalel was 65 years old, he became the father of Jared. After the birth of Jared, Mahalalel lived another 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Mahalalel lived 895 years. Then he died. When Jared was 162 years old, he became the father of Enoch. After the birth of Enoch, Jared lived another 800 years and he had other sons and daughters. Jared lived 962 years, then he died. When Enoch was 65 years old, he became the father of Methuselah. After the birth of Methuselah, Enoch lived in close fellowship with God for another 300 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Enoch lived 365 years, walking in close fellowship with God. Then one day he disappeared because God took him. All right, so Enoch is the only special example of the longevity of life in the first 10 generations because Enoch had such a special relationship with God that he was taken. It never says he died, it says he was taken by God. All right, so then, but the generations continue. When Methuselah was 187 years old, he became the father of Lamech. After the birth of Lamech, Methuselah lived another 782 years and he had other sons and daughters. Methuselah lived 969 years and then he died. When Lamech was 182 years old, he became the father of a son. Lamech named his son Noah, for he said, "May he bring us relief from our work and the painful labor of farming this ground that the Lord has cursed." After the birth of Noah, Lamech lived another 595 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Lamech lived 777 years, and then he died. All right, so this is important. Lamech is the father of Noah. Noah, you might be familiar with from the flood. The flood that we talked about 2 weeks ago, because we talked about how God blessed us with the sign of the rainbow and how the rainbow is a sign of covenant. It's not a toy. So if you want to see that live, go back to the one I did 2 weeks ago. But this was when Noah. So we've got 10 generations. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. First 10 generations. Y'all, this only covers about 1,000 years. So what you're going to find is when you start adding up everything that the Bible gives us as history from the beginning of time, right, to present day, you're never going to find the millions of years. This was only 1,000 years. By the time Noah was born, Adam had died. By the time the flood happened, of course, everybody who would have been alive by then would have died except Noah and his current family. Wife, sons, and their wife, his sons, and their wives. So I don't see where there was a lot of time. This was 10 generations that happened. So you can almost say like every 100 years there was something else going on. A new generation was being introduced when they were having sons and daughters. And of course, their sons and daughters are having sons and daughters. So the world is being populated pretty quickly at this point. There is no evidence for the millions of years. And remember, I just told you that they have to have this argument of a millions of years in order for evolution to make sense, because you need time for one atom to develop into more complex atoms that develop into these more complex species that somehow a gorilla creates a human. You have to have time in order for that to happen. There is no time. So when I first was doing my initial research, it was like, okay, well, this is good. And then, of course, you keep reading the Bible and you find out that there are other genealogies that exist beyond just this one with specifics to years. Okay, so what I'm going to show you next is, first of all, the Bible always confirms itself. So in one book, in Genesis, the creation story, you have who was born, and these are the generations. Well, they also confirm the generations that follow Adam, the descendants, in First Chronicles 1, verses 1 through 4. So it says, the descendants of Adam were Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. The sons of Noah were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. All right, so that's additional confirmation for you. On my next slide here, I have the second 10 generations from the flood to Canaan. So again, we know what the flood happened. Noah had, it says when Noah was 500 years old, he had Shem, Ham, Japheth. That leads me to believe that they were triplets, whatever. When you count 500 and you go through each, you're going to be like, okay, well, this is not much more time has passed here either. Ain't nothing but another 1,000 years until we get to the whole Abraham, Isaac, Jacob stuff happening. So again, that's only 2,000 years old that the earth is at this point. So we're going to read, because I got to give you proof. This genealogy is going to be found in, hold on, I skipped something. Let me look at the notes here. Okay, so we know that the earth had a fresh start with the population. So all the people who would have been having babies died at this point because the flood happened. So you got a fresh start with him, Shem, and Japheth. So because of the way that the genealogies pass down, Shem is the lineage that we follow. Just because that's what the Bible gives us. Shem is the line of that leads us to Jesus. All right, so because we have that, we're going to go forth through the second set of genealogy. All right, now, mind you, you've got Shem, and it says specifically 2 years after the great flood, when Shem was 100 years old. The flood happened when Shem was 100. 2 years after that, he gives birth to Arphaxad. That's his son. So that means flood must have happened when Shem was 98, because it was 40 days of the rain, and then it took so long for all of it to dry up, and then you got him at 100 years old. He's the father of Arphaxad. And you can follow this chart the same way I just did the other chart. It literally goes the same. I just didn't fill in all the spaces because you can go back and do the math yourself to figure out, well, how old was Arphaxad when Sarug was born and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to prove in the other one who had Sheila. After the birth of Sheila, Arphaxad lived another 403 years old and had other sons and daughters. When Sheila was 30 years old, he became the father of Eber. After the birth of Eber, Sheila lived another 403 and had other sons and daughters. When Eber was 34 years old, he became the father of Peleg. After the birth of Peleg, Eber lived another 430 years and had other sons and daughters. About how there was this tower. And what amazes me about, if you think about the genealogy, at some point we've got a whole fresh start happening with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They've got wives, they're all having kids and families. At some point, everybody lived together. It says, at one time, all the people of the world spoke the same language. So at some point in time, this is post flood. But before we get to Abraham enough, because Abraham, so we know that it happened before then. But at some point, they all were in the same place, and they decided to build this tower. It couldn't have been too many generations and too many people to where they decided after generations, a few generations after the flood, that they were going to disrespect God by trying to build a tower to essentially see heaven and become like God. So it couldn't have been that many generations um, removed. So how quickly we turn away from, my point is how quickly we turn away from what God has blessed us with. All right, so back to Eber. So when Eber was 34 years old, he became the father of Peleg. After the birth of Peleg, Eber lived another 430 years and had other sons and daughters. When Peleg was 30 years old, he became the father of Ruth. After the birth of Ruth, Peleg lived another 209 years and had other sons and daughters. Why am I reading all this to y'all? Because we have to understand that the Bible gives us very much so specifics. If I don't read it and I just talk from a place of, well, the Bible tells you how old the earth is, you won't believe me. The first 1,000 years happened between Adam up to Noah. The second 1,000 years is happening between Noah up to Abram. There is no evidence of 1,000,000 years in the Bible. Please understand this. When Ru was 32 years old, he became the father of Serug. After the birth of Serug, Ru lived another 207 years and had other sons and daughters. When Serug was 30 years old, he became the father of Nahor. After the birth of Nahor, Serug lived another 200 years and had other sons and daughters. When Nahor was 29 years old, he became the father of Terah. After the birth of Terah, Nahor lived another 119 years and had other sons and daughters. After Terah was 70 years old, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Y'all, this is not adding up. Science said that the dinosaurs existed millions of years ago before man walked the earth. Creation said that all the mammals that walked on the earth were created. Was that in day 5? So which one is the truth? Did the dinosaurs and the prehistoric animals walk the earth before the humans? Yes. How long before the humans? A day. Literally a day. Not millions of years. They was at the same time walking this earth. Was they before them? Yes, by a day. There is time that happened between like Abram and all this stuff. Well, we know Abram had Isaac when he was 100. So that's only 100 more years. Now we at a full century. I'm sorry, not a full century. Millennial. That's the second millennial. Adam to Noah, and then Noah's the Shem to Abram. 20 generations, about 2,000 years. There is no other time. So whatever happened whatever happened between then and now would have to account for the millions of years because our time is based on the Bible. Well, what happened, Jessica? Well, and if you want to see my PowerPoint, y'all can hop over to YouTube at Getting on Higher Ground, and so you can see the visual of what I'm giving. I also don't have a problem sharing this with anybody who wants like the chart, anything, just DM me your email. I'll send it right on over to you. Okay. So all the things that have happened between there, of course, I can't go into detail because then we'll be reading this whole Bible. But here are some of the high points. You've got the Tower of Babel happening. You've got the ancient civilizations developing, Mesopotamia. We've got Egypt, and some other places. All of those things, when they teach us in social studies and history about those things really did exist. They were ancient civilizations, ancient compared to like modern. They did exist, And they were the powerhouses of the Bible, and that's even proven in the Bible. When father was called, he was called from um, like the Chaldeans, which is essentially the Mesopotamia civilization. When you look at the map of it, it's Mesopotamia, and he was called to the land of Canaan, but he stopped midway and wanted to stay there. That is the whole ancient civilization time period that this is happening. So it really didn't take that long for these ancient civilizations to even develop, from the time of the flood up until in the Tower of Babylon, everybody being dispersed, up until what we're talking about now. We've got Abram being converted to Abraham, God blessing him and telling him he's going to have descendants as numerous as the stars, as much as the sand on the seashores, all of that. Joseph then goes to Egypt. Abram turns to Abraham. Abraham has Isaac. Isaac has Jacob. Jacob has Joseph and his 11 other brothers. Right? One of the brothers, Joseph, was taken to slavery into Egypt. We know that whole story. And then the descendants, though, that we follow are through Judah, because Judah was the actual child with the birthright. Joseph just so happened to be the child that was. So here we go. Where's the millions of years? This is only about another 500 years from when we just left off at the Abram being born. About 500 years later, the Israelites are getting out of slavery. Where's the millions of years? Is not there. We got them going into the promised land. They only spent 40 years in the wilderness. So now we at about what, maybe let's say 2,540 years from creation up until this point. Then you got them in the promised land. They have all the judges, they got the kings, they got David coming on the scene, they got the prophets, and then you have 42 generations to Jesus. The 42 generations, y'all, if you look at how history happened, they started living less and less. Like, they died sooner and sooner, or quicker and quicker, I should say, because God had stopped the timing pretty much to 120 years. So at some point, the generations got like shorter and shorter. So if you even calculate, let's say each person lived 100 years, 120 years. If you was to even add that to 42 generations, you still don't end up, because they having kids, between like most ages, about 30 years old or less. It never will get you to a million years. It only adds up to thousands of years. So where is this millions of years coming from? It just doesn't exist in the Bible. There's nowhere that I can point you to. What I can point you to is the generations to understand Jesus' genealogy, because Jesus' genealogy traces from the time of creation all the way to his birth. His genealogy is very concrete. The first 20 generations, it gives us a number of years that they even lived. And then it got smaller and smaller after that because of the curse. All right, so now I'm going to read y'all Genesis genealogy, and we're going to be done with this, because you still never going to get to this millions of years, and I don't have any more evidence to prove or disprove, because it doesn't exist, and it's a myth. All right, it's get off the hype that, oh, the earth is millions of years old, so how can X, Y? Nope, don't even stop saying it. Stop saying the earth is millions of years unless you can go and prove it. They don't have the proof. One great, good movie. Of course, I like documentaries, so I'm always be able to, speak from that point. Is Genesis History. I watched it years ago. I must have been in college, end of college, somewhere in there, years ago. It was on Netflix. Now you can find it on YouTube, because I watched it like a year or so ago, just because I wanted to relive that. Is Genesis History. It's a great, great movie. It helps you to understand the scientific evidence for the biblical flood and everything that happened. And what they do is they try to take evidence of fossilized animals in evolution science to prove that it's millions of years. But what they do in the millions of years. And then there's this app that's called I think it's the Genesis Project, or it's called Answers in Genesis. It's a YouTube channel, and they have an app, Answers in Genesis. It will give you so much proof and I found all these resources after I had already like started trying to understand it for myself. Answers in Genesis gives you a lot of information on creation and the time that science purports versus what's real. Okay, so let's finish up with this last of the genealogy. So we did the first 20. Now we pick up with Abraham having Isaac. So it says Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Aminadab. Aminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon slavery. You have the generation that was born to enter into the promised land with Joshua. You've got that is in the promised land. All right, after the famine, because there was a famine at one point in the land, and that's how we get the whole story of like Ruth and Boaz, because Ruth was a Moabite. She married one of Naomi's sons, and they had, because they had left Israel to go to Moab during the famine. So all that after the famine, these are the generations too. That's how we end up with Boaz and Obed. So then it says Simon was the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. That was during the time of them entering to the land of Canaan. That was in Jericho. Boaz was the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother was Bathsheba, the widow of Uriah. Solomon was the father of Rehoboam. Rehoboam was the father of Abijah. These are all the lineage of the kings I'm reading. Abijah was the father of Asa. Asa was the father of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat was the father of Jehoram. Jehoram was the father of Uzziah. Uzziah was the father of Jotham. Jotham was the father of Ahaz. Ahaz was the father of Hezekiah. Hezekiah was the father of Manasseh. Manasseh was the father of Ammon. Ammon was the father of Josiah. Josiah was the father of Jehoiachin and his brothers born at the time of the exile to Babylon. So you even get glimpses of how God is telling you that these things happen in history, so you can go back and cross-reference it with things in the Old Testament that you read in First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, Second Chronicles, all those books. It goes back to exile of Babylon. You can go and trace that to Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah and Ezekiel, exile to Babylon. After the Babylonian exile, this is another about 400 years of time that takes place in the Bible. Jehoiachin was the father of Shealtiel. Shealtiel was the father of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel was the father of Bui. Bui was the father of Eliakim. Eliakim was the father of Azor. Azor was the father of Zadok. Zadok was the father of Akim. Akim was the father of Eliud. Eliud was the father of Eleazar. Eleazar was, I love that name. Eleazar was the father of Mathan. Mathan was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Joseph and husband of Mary. So remember, the lineage of Jesus is traced through the father. So Mary wasn't related to the side that's being traced is Joseph, because even as a stepfather, like that is fatherhood. That is still your lineage. That's still your genealogy. So then we get to Jesus. That's the 42 generations. It's only about another 1,000 years, y'all. This is the crazy part. We've only gotten about, by the time Jesus is born, it's about what, 4,000 years of history in there from creation to Jesus. And then we're in year 2023. So how old is the earth really? It's not millions of years old. The estimate is between 6,000 and 7,000 years. I'm sure there's a particular number. You can go Google it. Although maybe Google isn't the best because they be giving all kind of stuff. So maybe go on that creation website that I referred to and figure out how old. But the earth is not millions of years. And I just wanted to be able to debunk it because I remember being in school. And being in school, they teach you that this is true. They teach it like it's true, and it's not true. There is a specific time period that God gives us in the Bible, and we are blessed enough to have access to this information. So, one, we have to stop saying it. You can't when you take your children to these natural history museums, it's going to be all over it. You have to debunk that for them also. We can't say it and we can't believe it. Even if we see it written somewhere, we cannot believe it because we know different. So once you study for yourself, you pray about it, you go over it, like you'll be surprised how ingrained it is for us to believe that the earth is millions of years, and it's caused problems because what it does is it makes us butt heads with the Bible. Well, the Bible only give you but so much information. Well, the Bible, I don't know, because this is what they say. This is what the scientists say. This is what the doctors say. This is what the world says. And we have to stand on the word of God every single time. If you can't find it, some relation in here is not real. So the science that's being purported needs to be identified based on what the Bible, because if it doesn't agree with it, then we don't have any evidence, and what they're saying is really just a theory. And unfortunately, the evolution theory that Darwin proposed has been taken and ran with. Why? The enemy has used it to cause us to question the Bible, and it's time for us to take it back. You cannot allow what a theory purports to make you believe that that's what it's about. It's not. So, with that being said, you can drop any questions that you may have in the chat. Hopefully, you were able to learn something, pull some information. I know I was long, but I hate just skipping into information and then not having evidence with it, and just sort of giving something that really is not going to make sense. So, please ask questions. You can DM me if you want to have additional evidence. You want a copy of the PowerPoint, you want whatever, let me know. I'm not sure what next week's topic is going to be, but if you have ideas or questions, let me know and I might use it for next week's topic. Um, Again, this is a culture correction series that I'm doing, and hopefully you all learned something. So have a blessed and wonderful day.